good morning. The end of our parasha tells us a bit of a complicated story when Miriam, the prophetess, Miriam and Nebiah, was punished with tzaraat, with leprosy on her skin. And as we know, the punishment for leprosy is to be outside of the Jewish camp for 7 days. After that, the person is healed and can return to the Jewish people, reintegrate into social life. Why? Leprosy usually happens when Lashon Hara is spoken. What happened to Miriam? She spoke about Moshe. There were 2 men that became prophets, and Moshe's wife says, "Oh, poor their wives. They will lose their husbands." Why? Because she thought that just like Moshe was no longer intimate with her because he was constantly in a state of holiness and he had to be available to God anytime, she thought that every prophet was like that. But the reality is Moshe was the only one that was commanded to physically separate from his wife, and no other prophet had that issue. But when Miriam and Aaron heard this comment, they said, "Hey, why is Moshe coming up with these things? We are prophets and we are not separated from our spouses. Why did he do such a thing?" And she mostly talked in a negative way, and therefore she was punished with tzaraat. Also, what God did to them that didn't do before is he called them suddenly, and they were not pure, and because they had engaged in intimate relations, and they realized that God's relationship with Moshe was very different than theirs, and they realized their mistake. Nevertheless, Miriam did get punished. She had this leprosy and had to be outside of the Jewish camp for 7 days. Now, the Torah tells us that the people did not travel until Miriam healed. They waited for her for a full week, and once she was isolated for 7 days, he had time to, like every tzaraat, time to reflect on their sin of speaking evil of somebody else. That's why he had to be isolated. Only after that, they were allowed to go back to society. Now, what would have happened if the Jewish people did not wait for Miriam? Of course, they wouldn't have left her alone on that place and continue traveling without her. That would have endangered her life. No, she would have traveled with everybody else. And once they camp, they start counting the 7 days when she's outside of the camp. Because as you travel, you're not considered that you're outside of the camp. Isolation, it's only when the Jewish people are stopped in a place, and there was the temple in the middle, surrounded by the Levites, surrounded by the Israelites, and outside of all 3 camps. That's what isolation means. Traveling is not considered isolation. Even if it is outside, together doesn't matter. No. So all the days of the travel will not count as the 7 days, and she would have started counting the 7 days once they camp and get healed. Big deal. But Rashi explains, this is beautiful part of the Midrash that we learn on Wednesdays, that this is a great honor that God gave Miriam to pay her for the time that she waited for Moshe when he was a baby and he was put in the river in the Nilus, it's written, that the sister stood from far watching to know what will happen with him. So because she waited for Moshe that hour, all Jewish people, over 2 million people, waited a week for her to get healed so she can get healed faster. Now, Rashi quotes these words, but Tatzav achoto merachok, his sister, meaning Moshe's sister Miriam, stood from far, etc. So, why is it etc.? Because Rashi wants you to pay attention to why she got this great honor that all Jewish nation waited for her for a week so she could heal faster, because she stayed ledea maya selo, etc. means what's the rest? She wanted to know what will happen to him. So she was standing afar. She couldn't do anything. She was powerless to do anything to save him, because they had put him, that was the only way he could be saved, by being in the river. But she wanted to know what will happen. She didn't want to leave him alone. And she did see that the daughter of Paro, Batya, came to take a swim or wash herself in the Nilus. And she found Moshe in the box that they made for him. And she said, she heard him crying and she had compassion on him. And she tried to have him nursed by Egyptian women, but Moshe will not nurse from them. She will not stop crying. So that's when Miriam came and she said, perhaps I can bring a Jewish nurse for this baby. The daughter of Paro said, fine. And Miriam brought her mother, Yocheved, and she was able to nurse him and calm him, stop him from crying. Now, what would have happened if Miriam was not there? Wouldn't have been too hard to figure out which kind of baby is this. I mean, who puts babies in the river? No normal people, only the Jews. That was the decree at the time, that all the Jewish babies had to be killed, the decree by Pharaoh. So eventually, Batya would have figured out that this is a Jewish kid that doesn't want to nurse from an Egyptian woman, and he would have brought a Jewish lady to nurse. So what did she accomplish, Miriam, by standing there? To shorten the suffering of her brother for an hour maybe, or a little time, until Batya would have figured out the problem and would have brought a Jewish nurse. So the reward that Miriam got for this, for watching over Moshe, not leaving him alone and bringing relief to him a little faster, is that God gave her such an honor, even if she has done something wrong, but nevertheless, that the whole Jewish nation waited for her to make sure that she heals as fast as possible, not delay for one moment. This reminds me of a sad story. If you walk into Yad Vashem, as soon as you walk in at the entrance, you see this sculpture. And I saw it many times and didn't know the story until our friend Jack Wiener brought us Felix Zandman, which is an amazing person, survivor of the Holocaust, and he's the one that commissioned this sculpture. What's the story behind it? He says they were hiding from the Nazis in the Kovno ghetto, and they had little children, very young children, and they were in a cellar in a situation that they had to be absolutely quiet. Now, these two children were crying, were making noise, and it was a very difficult thing to do. But there was a lot of people in that cellar, and these two children were going to attract the attention of the Nazis, and everybody was going to die. So they say, as painful as it was, those children had to go. They were taken out of the cellar, and they were going just to be left outside. But the grandfather of the children said, I can't do that. Even though they knew that the children for sure were going to die, and anybody with them also was going to die, he said, I can't let those children spend the last hour in the world alone. And he went and he comforted them. I'm sure, sadly, the Nazis found him and they murdered the babies and they murdered him. But his generosity, that he sacrificed his life to make sure that two Jewish children don't spend the last hour in the world alone, crying without somebody comforted them, is why it inspired Felix to put this sculpture, this memorial in Yad Vashem. So we see from our parasha, from this story, the tremendous value of having rahmanut, compassion, caring for someone, even if you can shorten the pain of someone for a few minutes. Do it. The reward, even if you have to sacrifice something, the reward that Hashem gives you, the way this will affect the world will be tremendous. And this is the lesson from the end of our parasha. Do not stand by the pain of your brother. If you can do anything to help someone, shorten the pain, be compassionate, show empathy, even if you cannot change the situation, do it, because with Ahavat Israel, Navi et HaGoel, with love, showing love for our fellows, we will bring the Goel, redemption, the Mashiach that we need so much today. Thank you for joining, for watching. God willing, next class will be tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Have a blessed day. Shalom.